SteamOS 3.5 is heating up. You might want to be careful before installing the Steam Deck mod. And did we just get good news about Armored Core 6 on deck? How's it going, everyone? Welcome to Deck Ready. This is the weekly news update here on the channel for everything Steam Deck. There is a ton of hardware news this week, but before we jump into it, just wanted to ask if you'd be cool enough to subscribe and set your notifications to all. All right, so the first thing I wanted to talk about this week is the impending SteamOS 3.5 update. This one has been in the works for a very long time now. We have seen updates that say it's almost ready. You can use it in the preview version of the beta, and I don't know why it's taking so long, but I'd really like to get it on my Steam Deck because the biggest feature that's coming along with it is a total overhaul of how the shader cache system works so that it's going to take up way less space on your deck. And like every other feature that I've done videos on before sounds cool, but that's the biggest one I'm the most excited for. Now, the interesting thing about this update is that for a few months now, it seemed like Valve is kind of feature complete on it, and they've just been bug fixing and tweaking away, trying to get it like stable so that they can actually release it into the stable branch and there won't be any complaints or issues with the Steam Deck, because right now there are more Steam Decks out there than ever before, especially when you take into consideration the whole refurbish program that they just launched. But in the 11th hour here, well, I guess hopefully in the 11th hour, because I want this update to come out, there's new features being added, and this one is pretty cool. So the new slider that's being added to the quick access menu is a color temperature slider, so you're going to be able to make the image on the screen more blue or more orange, I would say. I know there's a more technical term for it. It's basically like the difference between cool light and warm light, and I know how that works because I have filming equipment down here, and when I was getting these recessed lights put in my basement, I was like, I want them to be really cool because then they'll work better with my camera and how I have it set up, and that actually worked pretty well. I think like the lighting in here looks pretty decent if you ask me. But this kind of seems like a direct response to all the handhelds that have been coming out lately, like the Aya Neo 2S and the ROG Ally. The ROG Ally specifically has a really good screen, and when you put it side by side with the Steam Deck, even running it at 720p, the ROG Ally that is, it looks a lot better than the Steam Deck in terms of color, I would say. And one issue with the Steam Deck is that when you buy one, you're getting a different screen pretty much every time. It seems like you'll get one with light bleed, you'll get one without light bleed, you'll get one that's too blue, you'll get one that's too orange. You know, there's a lot of variance in the panels that Valve uses, so by including a color temperature slider, they're basically giving us the ability to dial it in ourselves, which I think is pretty cool, because with performance profiles, if this works how I think it's going to, you'll be able to dial in your game perfectly and then save that settings for specifically that game. And on top of that, keep in mind we're also getting a vibrant slider, which is kind of stealing the feature of Vibrant Deck and adding it to the quick access menu, but that's going to get the screen looking pretty good as well. So while yeah, there are other options out there, like one I'm going to talk about in the next news story, it's good to know that for people who don't want to take apart their entire Steam Deck and remove the adhesive on the screen and go out of their way to really take the thing apart, they're going to have a software option available that kind of gets them most of the way there. Now, I'm definitely not complaining about getting new features, but at this point, if they're adding new features, I would just prefer them actually finish the update and release it and then start working on new features. This was announced a long time ago, and like I mentioned, it has really good features like making the shader cache smaller on your Steam Deck. And even for me, as someone who has a 1TB SD card and a 1TB SSD inside the Steam Deck, I am running out of space. And when I look at the storage breakdown, when you go into the settings and then storage, a big chunk of that is being taken up by the shader cache. And I know that you can clear it out and kind of start it over and then also turn off automatic downloads of the shader cache, but that's kind of like a feature I would like to leave at default on the Steam Deck. So my preferred option would be to just use what's included in SteamOS 3.5. But the silver lining with how long SteamOS 3.5 is taking is that every single day that it takes adds more credence to the rumor that this is going to be the big release of SteamOS 3.0, where we're going to be able to download it to our native PCs and mess around with it there. My main desktop now is the ROG Ally using the 4090 XG Mobile, and I really like it. It's running everything I throw at it super well, but if I could install SteamOS 3.5 either on a partition or just have it take over the entire OS and still use that XG Mobile, that would be the best of both worlds. I know that's like super technical and not really in Valve's hands, and Asus would have to kind of support it, and I doubt they would, but that's kind of the dream at this point. And regardless, I still have my Razer Blade with the 3080 Ti in it, and I will definitely be installing SteamOS on that when it's available. So yeah, I'd really like to see this come out, and I really hope, like I have my fingers crossed, that we're going to get the full release of SteamOS with this update to 3.5 on the deck. But yeah, it's not like my deck is running crappy or anything like that. that, I've been playing Zombie Army 4. I don't know why, I'm just in a huge zombie kick lately. I've been watching The Walking Dead Dead City. I moved on and like went back to where I stopped watching The Walking Dead, and except for the Telltale games, there are no good Walking Dead games. So I went for the next best thing, which is of course Zombie Army 4. If you've never played it, it runs at medium settings, 60 FPS, totally locked at native like 800p, and you don't even have to use upscalers. And if you're into horror movies like I am, the soundtrack in this game is incredible. It totally pulls from all sorts of different IP like John Carpenter stuff and everything like that. It feels like you're playing through an old World War II B movie with zombies in it, and it totally goes perfectly with everything that The Walking Dead is lately. Like super schlocky and fun with tons of gore and zombies and like headshots taking them out. So if you're looking for a game to play, check that out. And yeah, I hope SteamOS 3.5 is out sooner rather than later. Thank you for suffering through that tangent about zombies. So next up here, I wanted to talk about an article I saw breaking down the process of installing the Jsaux backplate for the Steam Deck, and also some of the drawbacks that come along with it, because you know they are kind of noticeable once you get this thing on your device. So if you've never checked these out before, there are multiple different brands that make them, and now you can even get full shell swaps for the Steam Deck. But if you want the simplest way to do this, Jsaux makes a $30 back cover replacement for the deck that also comes along with a new heatsink built in, which is basically like a plate of aluminum that transfers heat out of the back of the device. So once this reviewer got everything put together, which doesn't take very long, you just kind of unscrew the back of your Steam Deck, you use the included screws that Jsaux gives you, including their back buttons as well, and then you're pretty much good to go. They noticed some issues with both the back plate, like the actual heatsink that's installed, and also just the whole back cover itself. So the issue they noticed with the back plate is that it does transfer heat, but almost a little too well. This makes a lot of sense, right? Like it's transferring heat, so you probably shouldn't just rest your finger on it. But for me personally, I ended up taking off the back cover on my Steam Deck because my hands are bigger and the tips of my finger would kind of rest on that little plate on the back, and it was just hot enough to be annoying. But I didn't really see anyone else complaining about it, so I figured it was just a me problem. But now I'm seeing in this article that yeah, if you touch it, it is going to be pretty hot after a while of gaming. The other issue they had that I personally didn't notice is that the backplate apparently made their Steam Deck smell worse. I like the smell of the Steam Deck, right? Like the exhaust fan smell that comes out is kind of a meme at this point because it smells really good for some reason. It smells like a new computer type of smell. But when you put on this new backplate, apparently it makes it a little bit stinkier, which, you know, that's not great. You don't want to notice any smell, but at least when you notice the smell out of a stock Steam Deck, it's a pretty good smell, I guess. So yeah, I'm just pointing it out, but I personally didn't have that issue. But the other issue they encountered that I also had is that these back covers just don't really fit all that well, to the point where like there's going to be a little bit of a lip either on one side or both sides of the Steam Deck. The back buttons are still going to work, and there shouldn't be any trigger rub or anything like that, which is great because that was an issue with the actual like stock Steam Decks where people were getting them and the screws were screwed in too tight on the back. It was pretty much one of the triggers. I think it was the left one, but I'm not entirely sure. But yeah, that's not good that the official Steam Deck you're getting from Valve with like a stock case on it is having that rub issue. So yeah, it is good that the new ones from Jsaux don't have that specific issue, but I just don't like that feeling of the meat of my palm here kind of resting on a like edge on the side, and it's just something for me that I immediately noticed. And I tried out some different back covers because Jsaux actually sent all the colors over when they made them, and it's an issue that's like going to affect pretty much everyone, but the lip will be in a different spot on everyone's Steam Deck, so it's kind of a crapshoot because if it's on the bottom, it's not really going to bother you, but if like you had the one that I had, which was on the side, it would probably bother most people. But as far as that backplate goes, you know, the heatsink they include, you can actually just swap that out for the original one, and it's not really that painful of a process like using the actual aluminum one can be if you have bigger hands and you decide to hold the Steam Deck in your right hand. But yeah, those are just some minor problems, and there have been a ton of videos out there from people like Bob Wolf over at the Wolf Den where he kind of like converted his entire Steam Deck, including installing new buttons in it that are multicolored. I know the Deckverse is working on a similar thing there, so I like that you have options here, right? Like you can go minimal with it and just replace the back cover, and even at that point you can take it a little bit further and use Jsaux's new back buttons, or you can use the clones of the original back buttons if you just like the way they work already. You can also have this heat sink if you have smaller hands or you just know yourself and know you aren't going to end up touching that aluminum plate on the back, or you can go all the way and replace the entire shell and get an atomic purple Steam Deck. And as we're going to talk about in this next story, you can also go as far as switching out the screen to either get a 1200p screen, or you can get a matte screen, even if you didn't buy the most expensive Steam Deck. So yeah, we'll just get into that one now. This one's a little bit scary to me, but for $90 you can actually get a new screen for your Steam Deck that does have the anti-glare stuff on it that the 512 gigabyte option already does. So if you're someone who really wants to save money here and get the anti-glare look on your Steam Deck and you don't really like the way the screen protectors work because they do make the screen a little bit fuzzy, all you would really have to do is go for a refurbished 64 gigabyte Steam Deck and then buy this for 90 bucks. And then for the price of the 512 gigabyte Steam Deck, at least from a hardware perspective, you're getting the same thing. Now, I have definitely seen the 2230 SSDs going on sale for around 60 or 70 bucks, so you would be kind of approaching the price of the 256 gigabyte model, but still getting that anti-glare screen is kind of worth it in my opinion if you're the kind of person who's handy enough and you trust yourself enough to take this entire thing apart and remove the adhesive of the screen. There's also, of course, the Deck HD project, which just launched, and that'll give you a 1200p screen. And in Taki Udon's video, he was playing games like Spider-Man Remastered, and it was getting pretty similar performance to the 800p screen, which is honestly kind of shocking to me personally, because if you look at the ROG Ally, if you're playing a game at 1080p, it's really tough to even run games at medium settings, getting a locked 30 FPS. But if you drop it down to 720p, the performance jump is absolutely insane on that thing. And that chip inside that device is pretty strong compared to the chip inside the Steam Deck, but it just goes to show how well optimized the Steam Deck is to run at 15 watts. Still, for me, it's just a little bit more trouble than it's worth, because not only do you have to go through the whole process of switching out the screen, which is way more than I want to do with my personal Steam Deck, you also have to do things like scale up SteamOS, and you might have to install new BIOS to your Steam Deck, which is a pretty tricky process. You have to pick the right version of SteamOS, whether you're talking the beta or the stable branch, to get the specific one that this screen will work with. And yeah, I could just totally see myself buying this thing, spending all night getting that screen off, installing the new screen on my Steam Deck, closing it back up, putting everything together, turning it on, and realizing that I screwed something up. And the last news story I have for you guys today is that Armored Core 6 is right around the corner. This one's coming to PC date and date, just like Elden Ring. And because Elden Ring was kind of the savior of the Steam Deck's launch, with Valve fixing the game on PC so that it ran super well on the Steam Deck, people are kind of looking forward to this game, wondering if it's going to run on the device. And for once, the news here is really damn good. So as far as the requirements go, it's actually very similar to Elden Ring, but the big difference is you'll only need a 1650 instead of a 1070 to run this game, so it's probably going to be a lot easier to run. And I also noticed that on the PlayStation 5, it's targeting 4K 60 FPS, and this is a cross-gen game, just like Elden Ring was too. So that's another good sign that this will run pretty well on the Steam Deck. And if I'm being honest, the ray tracing requirements are pretty low as well, only going up to a 2070. So if you have a modern card like a 3070 or 3080, or maybe even a 3060, you'll probably be able to get through some ray tracing on this game. But as far as the Steam Deck goes, I don't think that's going to really cut it with ray tracing. Last I checked, there was no verification rating on the Steam Deck for this, but I'm pretty sure that Valve and Bandai Namco and I guess From Software are probably all going to be talking to make sure that this thing launches with some verification or compatibility on the Steam Deck, because, you know, Valve's been verifying stuff like Remnant 2 and Baldur's Gate 3, and those games can barely hold 30 FPS on the device, and they kind of look bad at their lowest settings, especially when you're using FSR 1.0 in Baldur's Gate. So if those can clear Valve's extremely stringent requirements to get Steam Deck verification, I don't think Armored Core 6 is going to have any trouble, because from what it seems like, this game is going to have no issue at all running on the device. I would love to play this game on the deck. I did check out Daemon X Machina, that Nintendo Switch former exclusive that eventually came to Steam, and it just didn't really work for me. I'm a huge From Software fan, and I've actually always liked how dark the Armored Core games are. Just the lighting and the overall visual tone of these games is more dark than you would see from something like, I don't know, Xenoblade. So yeah, I'm really excited to check this game out. It's kind of like the biggest fall ever though, between that, Starfield, and of course Baldur's Gate coming to console. There's a lot going on, and then right after that, you've got Alan Wake 2, Spider-Man 2, and Lords of the Fallen. So it's going to be a huge fall for games, but if you're really looking forward to Armored Core 6, you should be happy to know that you won't have much trouble running it on your Steam Deck. Probably. I don't want to say until we see it, but this is the best I've felt about a game running on the device in a long time, with all of these ports that have been getting verified, getting my hopes up, and then I go to play them, and then they don't work as well as you would initially think. I'm really gunning for Valve with SteamOS 3.5 to just please include some sort of verification plus, or just have verified means that it runs reasonably well at 720p 30. Like if you get some loading stutters once in a while, or like the frame drops to 28 when something crazy is going on, like a lot of fire effects, I think that's acceptable but shouldn't be the norm. But if you're talking you're talking about a situation like you have with Baldur's Gate 3, where you essentially have to run the game at 24 FPS to get game. Anyway, guys, that's all I've got for you today. Make sure you let me know what you think down in the comments below. Remember to subscribe and set your notifications to all if you haven't already. As always, my name is Jimmy Champagne, and I'll see you in the next one. Thanks for watching, and shape on.